The Jimquisition has been more divisive than usual recently, and that brings with it, as always, the usual gaggle of haters and harassers and trolls, and they've been wondering, how do we hurt this Jim Sterling? How do we hurt him? Well, to those people I say, don't bother. This weekend I watched Puppet Master, Hideous, I watched Head of the Family, I watched Blood Dolls, that was the worst one, I watched Doll Man, I watched Demonic Toys, all in one weekend, all by choice. There's nothing left to take from me. I sat down and watched Blood Dolls.
So, my dear, let us kiss.
What's the matter, my dear?
Fucking Blood Dolls.
The Epic Games Store has proven divisive to say the least, and conversation around the service that hopes to topple Steam is downright vicious. In a previous video, I argued that Epic offers a better deal and less problematic baggage than Steam does, and I gotta say I was surprised at exactly how furious and incredulous the response was from those who took the video as a glowing endorsement of Epic's launcher. Perhaps the fault was mine in focusing purely on the developer benefits and not adding lots of disclaimers, for indeed when it comes to the Epic Store, disclaimers for the user end can be shared in droves. Why is Epic so unpopular at the moment? One main reason would be that Steam has established itself so ubiquitously and integrally among PC-using game buyers that it feels downright wrong for many to consider any other launcher. It breaks up their game library. Part of this always comes down to brand loyalty, as some people will feel inclined to pick sides between corporations that don't really give a shit about them, but there's a deeper level than that. For all its faults, Valve has done very clever things with Steam, baking a news feed, community features, achievements, and entire supportive infrastructure around its game launcher. Steam doesn't just launch games, it hosts them really. It acts as a unifying glue holding people's libraries together and providing an expected set of reliable features for every piece of software. It's done this so well that one could argue Steam Gaming is its own distinct subset of PC gaming. It's not just a store, a launcher, but a veritable platform in its own right, with the clearly branded functionality of any game-specific hardware. There's also the fact that, well, we are all pretty lazy deep down, and having to make new accounts and keep separate logins for lots of launchers just to keep up with video games is a drag. As well as storefronts like Steam, Origin, GOG, and Epic, we have companies wanting us to make bespoke accounts for individual game releases. Electronic Arts and Ubisoft love having you log into their own bullshit wherever you play, and at the same time companies like Bethesda are using their own special launchers for garbage like Fallout 76. It's a hassle, and if you're expecting people to create another account to hassle themselves, you better be offering something good. And here's where Epic trips up. Right now, as a storefront, it's threadbare. It can sell you games, that much is true, and it can launch those games, that much is expected, but it lacks a number of basic features, to say nothing of the community options and integrated backbone of support that Steam has. Epic recently published a roadmap of expected updates for its storefront, and it highlights exactly how behind the times it is. Only recent updates have included such rudimentary features as preloading, regional pricing, an offline mode, and a bloody store search function. It won't be until April that you can search via genre or tags, alongside cloud saves and video support. Future updates will include other functions that are conspicuous in their current absence, such as user reviews, wish lists, mod support, automated refunds, and, perhaps most surprisingly of all, a shopping cart. Yeah, there's currently no shopping cart for the Epic Store, so if you're planning on picking up multiple games, you'll be buying them individually for up to 6 months, according to this roadmap. With the store having launched last December, that'll make it roughly 9 months without one of the most obvious and basic elements of an online store. You can have a baby before Epic gets a shopping cart. But of course, where things get really bitter is when it comes to the games themselves. Lacking the feature advantage, Epic Games has utilised the one major coup it has over Valve: money. Vast quantities of dizzying, glittering money. Backed up by the massive success of Fortnite and further bankrolled by a wealthy parent company in Tencent, Epic has been throwing its financial weight around in order to stand out from the crowd, simply buying its way to exclusive game releases that you will need the Epic launcher for. They say that if you build it, they will come, but that simply ain't true. If you built it and close off all other roads but yours, however, then they won't have a choice but to come, and that's the route Epic's taken. Now this bit's gonna be hard to hear for some people, but what Epic's doing? It's super effective. You can call Epic anti-customer, you can call their tactics scummy, but you can't call it unsuccessful. I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying Epic's doing this because it's working. Exclusivity is a bugbear of the gaming community, but it's the quickest and the surest way to secure an advantage. If simply making a great service was the way to topple Valve's dominion of the PC market, GOG would be running the show. The game industry has traded on exclusivity for years, with consoles often defined by the games that no other system has. As publishers seek wider and wider audiences, however, the concept of AAA exclusivity has eroded to almost entirely first-party games. But indeed, the concept of exclusivity has eroded, and on PC, it's not a concept that many users are as intensely familiar with as people who have spent most of their time gaming on consoles. So in this regard, Epic has been hit not just with backlash, but what could only be described as disgust from the PC gaming crowd. The hate for Epic has gotten so bad we're rapidly approaching backlash to the backlash territory, where people have gotten so sick of hearing a company get dumped upon, they're now starting to feel sorry for the company, or at the very least they're just sick of hearing about it. The whole thing is an utter shit show, but it's a shit show in which Epic hasn't really done itself any favours. Metro Exodus was one of the high-profile shitstorms in this regard, due in no small part to the fact that the game was promised for Steam and even up for pre-order on Valve's service before it became a timed exclusive to the Epic Store roughly a month before launch. While Steam pre-orders were honoured, it nonetheless felt like Deep Silver had pulled the rug out from under people, and it really highlighted how much those people cared about using Steam. The anger from fans was so harsh that Deep Silver had to issue a statement taking full responsibility and asking the audience not to direct their ill will toward Metro's developer, 4A Games, since they had no hand in the decision. Nevertheless, the game was review bombed to hell and back on Steam, and the situation got no better when a developer went rogue to shit all over those who complained, threatening the future of Metro on PC if the game didn't sell well in the fallout. But if 4A Games had it tough, Snapshot Games has an indefinite reservation at the Holy Fuck Hotel. Like many other indie developers, Snapshot revealed its game, Phoenix Point, would become a timed exclusive on Epic Storefront for a 12-month period. But there's an added complication. Phoenix Point was crowdfunded on Fig to the tune of $765,948. With Steam and GOG keys offered to backers as rewards, a lot of people saw this as a real fuck you, given that the audience had come together to give Snapshot a load of money, and Snapshot made their game exclusive to just one store in exchange for a shitload more money. An unlisted but still visible video by creative director Julian Gollop explaining the move currently sits at 8,000 dislikes to less than 500 likes, and is littered with furious comments from people who feel like they got sold out. When it comes to crowdfunded content, you have to be especially careful, and I speak from experience. Even if you're clear in your goals and open about the money you receive, there will always be a contingent of people ready to accuse you of scamming, and that's at the best of times. You do not want to appear compromised if the money funding you is coming from the public, but in taking whatever bonus cash Epic gave them, that's exactly how Snapshot looked. Now, when it comes to crowdfunded games, I feel like some of the demands for financial purity can get a little unrealistic and unreasonable. Sometimes a game project simply needs some more money. There can be legitimate reasons for it, there can be mismanagement reasons for it, but in order to ship the product people are expecting, sometimes a studio finds itself reaching out for more help. There are ways to go about that and ways to communicate that with the audience that won't piss everybody off. Again, there will always be someone yelling scam, there will always be people who fundamentally misunderstand what crowdfunding actually is, but you can mitigate the amount of people doing that. Getting your extra money by making yourself exclusive to one PC game launcher, well, clearly looking at the evidence, that ain't the way to do it. As I said, you gotta be so careful to not look compromised if your game is crowdfunded. You are under an intensely harsh, some may say unfairly harsh, microscope. But harsh or not, the reality is that most people consider crowdfunding a sort of pre-order. Now, we can do an entire episode on the truth of that matter, but it is the perception, and using that perception is how a lot of games get funded. They're funded by people who are expecting a game on the platforms promised. Sometimes a game project takes long enough that releasing on certain platforms becomes unviable. For example, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night going back on its plan to support the PlayStation Vita. But Phoenix Point reneged on the decision to release on very viable platforms, and it did so in exchange for a fat dirty stack of cash, which is just a terrible look for any crowd-funded project. It's one of those situations where I look at it and say, now I'm not in PR, but if anybody wants some free public relations advice from yours truly, don't take money for your crowd-funded game in exchange for restricting access to the game. It's what we professionals call a mighty bad look. In any case, Epic hasn't stopped buying up exclusives, and thanks to those two high-profile PR nightmares in Metro and Phoenix Point, no amount of private funding or advance warning is stemming the barrage of hatred for Epic's exclusives right now. Epic has Supergiant's latest game, Hades, it has Journey to the Savage Planet, it has Ashen, it has Kine, Maneater, and Solar Ash Kingdom. The Division 2 skipped Steam and favoured Epic. More recently, it picked up Beyond Two Souls, Heavy Rain, and Detroit Become Human, cornering the PC market for pretentious David Cage waffle. The excellent-looking Outer Worlds by Obsidian, already hoped by many to be the Fallout alternative Bethesda's just too incompetent to make, is the latest game to hitch its wagon to Epic, and given how much hope people had for that game, it's been a particularly embittered situation. Obsidian's hot new game may end up being the final straw in one of two ways. Either this will be the game that cements Epic's place as a pariah in the PC market, or it'll be the game that finally forces people to download the Fortnite company's launcher. Many comments talk about how they just lost interest in the game and how the news has saved them $60. But gamer boycotts are notoriously flimsy, so it's going to be fascinating to see if the exclusivity helps or harms the Outer Worlds. Something tells me that for all the outrage, for all the anger, for all the sense of betrayal, the Outer Worlds is going to do just fine. No doubt Obsidian has done its own calculations about the risk versus reward here and deemed that they'll get out of this just fine, which for the Outer Worlds is probably true.
Holy shit, them some big eyes, brother.
Despite the PR risks, it's not hard to see why developers and publishers are taking Epic's deal. As well as the fact Epic is just tossing money at them, their revenue split is much more generous than Steam's, taking only 12% as compared to Steam's 30%. For indie developers, there's another benefit, the chance to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I've spoken with developers in the past who jumped on the Nintendo Switch when it became easy to do so, and they spoke about how hard it is to get noticed on Valve's platform, since their work is rapidly buried by the dozens of asset flips that launch every day. Steam's total lack of moderation means it's a painfully oversaturated market, and there are indies who've been begging to jump ship. Now, Epic can't just keep throwing money around forever. Epic knows this as well, and what it's doing right now is a temporary tactic to seed the storefront and force it to be an essential component of people's game buying lives. It's working out okay so far. Metro Exodus has reportedly sold pretty damn well for itself, but there is no doubt that it is using force and practically nothing else of value to the end user. Yes, one could argue that exclusivity means that all you're doing is downloading another launcher, and that ultimately doing so ain't that big of a deal. It's certainly not like buying a whole console for certain games, but that doesn't alter the fact that the Epic launcher has nothing going for it that makes it worth downloading other than the fact it's strong-arming people into using it. Epic is being aggressive, but it's not being truly competitive, not where it matters. Long-term, it has to offer a better service than Steam. Getting people to use the Epic launcher is just the very beginning. They have to work out a way to get people to keep it. And they've managed to acquire so much bad press, so much negativity, that they're only making that task harder to perform. Will enough customers stick around after buying the game they felt railroaded into downloading Epic for? Because right now, Epic has nothing worth sticking around for. All it really has is content held to ransom. Will indie developers, having chosen a lead role in a cage over a walk-on part in the war, find Epic's generous cut offsets the public outrage? Is it more beneficial to be on a storefront with more users but more competition, or fewer users and less competition? These are questions that will be answered in time as we see how well those games perform without being surrounded on all sides by competing titles. I stick by what I've said before about welcoming Epic storefront into the contest. Competition is always better than a de facto monopoly, because without it, corporations feel no obligation to improve. They certainly don't think that your satisfaction is enough of a fucking motivator. This is why the broadband infrastructure in America has been so fucked for so long. Internet providers have carved up the country into little fiefdoms so they don't tread on each other's toes, which grants them full license to pretty much treat us all like dirt. Companies don't invest in their own products unless they're made to, and there can be no argument that Valve's become incredibly complacent atop the mountain. Its storefront is a chaotic mess, and it is going to end up in trouble with its anything goes approach. This is why I do welcome companies like Epic, companies with the capital to give it something to worry about. This long-term view toward end-user benefit is why I've talked about Epic's advantages in the past. And no, it's not nice having a company like Tencent involved, but unfortunately we're stuck within the triple capitalism system where money is the only thing that talks, and that again is its own video. One I've more or less already done. You can look up half a dozen videos I've done where I blame capitalism for everything. Anyway, historically we as customers get better products when companies are scared of losing us to other companies. Corporations should have better standards than that, but they don't. All that said, Epic does most definitely need to pull its finger out, because it can't sustainably bribe game companies forever, and without that bribery, it's got nothing. It's all aggression, no competition, and realistically the former is pointless without the latter. Ultimately, it all comes down to one simple thing: service. Service, service, service. Whoever has the better service will hold the advantage. It's all very well Epic bringing us to the watering hole, but we've got a drink, and right now that water is looking pretty damn shallow.
Anyway, I do have to wonder if a lot of this hate for Epic does stem from the fact that its service right now is a bit rubbish. Because I'm thinking about it, and I'm imagining, say, a video streaming service, a competitor to YouTube coming along and offering YouTube channels lots of money to make exclusive videos for them. And I don't give a shit about that idea. I don't give a shit. In fact, I would welcome that a lot more than I welcome the idea of competition in the PC gaming distribution market. I think that'd be brilliant. Mostly because Google is a load of old shit, and also I can't imagine how many video services wouldn't be better platforms than something operated by YouTube. So I think it is all a matter of perspective and a matter of, as I say in the video, service, service, service. That's the important thing, and I do feel that those with the better services will stand out. And I do feel that we are going to have to get used to the idea of offering that idea in the plural, services, because as we've seen with movies and television and stuff like that, platforms, after long periods of unity, do divide. And we are looking at a potential place now in PC gaming where the division has started. Not the video game, The Division. What I'm talking about is way more interesting. Where that division has started and we are looking at individual fiefdoms instead of one big monolithic entity, which is inconvenient in some ways, but I do still think in a very future-thinking, forward-thinking way, I do believe that over time, the erosion of a de facto monopoly is better for us, at least until you know, big corporations come along and then buy everything and just make it all look separate when it's just owned by one thing. Because that's capitalism for you. That's capitalism, folks. Thank God for me. Ugh. Oh, sorry if today's video was croaky, still got bronchitis, my voice went away. Alright, love you, bye.